So we're joined from Gulfport, Mississippi, by my friend Tiffany Bell. We thank you so much for joining us, the founder of the Nonprofit CEO Network and Uncommon Courage. Just so many things you've done to build up Black-owned businesses and female businesses all across the country. But this is my entrepreneurship class here at Velma Jackson High School. We're recording this for all of our friends in Madison County schools, Madison Central, Ridgeland High School, Germantown High School, the Academic Options Center, and our YouTube channel. So thank you so much for taking some time for us today.
I'm very glad to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Oh, and I'm glad I finally got you on here. Now, obviously, we want to talk about all the great things you do in business and your mission that you have for the community. But just give us a little background because you are originally from South Carolina, the Palmetto State, went to the University of South Carolina, and then spent some time in the military.
Yes, yes, yes. So I was saying a little earlier, so I originally joined the Air National Guard for the state of South Carolina. I did X-ray. Funny story, even with that, I thought that when I was enrolling there that I was going to do X-ray on airplane parts. It wasn't until like a couple of maybe about 2 weeks before the end of basic training is when you get your orders. When I got my orders and found out I was going to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, that's when I realized that I'd be working in a hospital on human bodies. And so I
Ooh.
remember being really surprised by that. But, of course, that ended up really being a really great thing for me. And so, fast forward 8 years later, I met my husband, and he was serving active duty Air Force here at Keesler Air Force Base, which is in Mississippi. And so that's what originally brought me here. And even with Mississippi, I remember being quite surprised. So again, being from South Carolina, the history in South Carolina really isn't much different than the history of Mississippi. But I do remember learning, like in the third grade, about Mississippi and the Confederacy, all those things. I remember thinking like, well, why do Black people even live in Mississippi? Why does that state even continue to exist? And so, and I was like, oh, I'll never live there. And then lo and behold, I have come to Mississippi. Yeah, of course, grown into adulthood, learned far more about history, and I'm not necessarily looking at it through the eyes of a 9-year-old third grade child, but I have come to love Mississippi. I love the people here. I love the hearts. Like we are a generous group of people that really go about supporting all cultures, and so because of that, I hands down, I try to get as many people to come in and just discover what a hidden jewel we really are.
Yeah, and before we get ahead of ourselves, that is so cool to say that because so many people that come from other places just talk about how friendly people in Mississippi are, how it would be great to do business here. Now, people aren't too fond of the weather, but other than that, really such a great place to be in business. And I got to give a big shout out to my high school football teammate, John Archie, who was a head football coach at Gulfport High School, now over there in Pascagoula High School, doing some great things on the coast as well. So, got to give a shout out to my man, who's a big part of the coast community as well. Now, you've been involved in business consulting, business podcasting, business promotion for years, and it really has become a big passion of yours. You're all over Instagram promoting female-owned businesses, and you have your own nonprofit, which helps other nonprofits. So, talk about how you got into the entrepreneurship space and what really led you to start working with entrepreneurs.
So originally, like I came first into the nonprofit space, and in the nonprofit space, which really kind of came about. My husband was in an accident, passed away suddenly, wasn't expecting that, and so at the time I was still doing radiology. And this was not very long. This is a couple of years after Hurricane Katrina. And so the hospital that I was working at, it ended up closing down. And as a result of it closing down and my husband passing earlier that same year, I just decided to take a year off. And so I took that year off. I began volunteering, and I volunteered at a pregnancy resource center at a nonprofit. And that's, just having so many people that poured into me to help me to get through me and my boys to get through the time of grieving with my husband, and just getting resettled in. And at the time, my husband and I, we were entrepreneurs. He had his own business, and it was really through that business that, he ended up suffering, having an accident. And we had a few different rental properties. And so transitioning out of that and trying to handle all that full time and be a mom and work, it was a bit much. And so again, took the year off. And wanted to figure out a way that I could give back. And so eventually I became the executive director for that nonprofit. And still, nonprofit world, you don't get paid. It's very fulfilling, but you don't really make as much money at certain nonprofits, even being executive director. And so I needed to find a way to be able to create additional income for me. And so at that point, me and a couple of other partners came together and we formed what we called back then the Success Moves Conference. And it grew to be very successful. We did that for
Oh
about
yeah.
6 years. We would have anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 people come in from like all over the world. It represented 25 states here in the US, plus 7 countries. But again, people just came
Oh,
in from all over the world here to Biloxi, Mississippi to come to that conference. And so the conference was great, right? But it still was shared income between me and my two business partners. So we each divided up the audiences that came. So there was corporate entrepreneurs and nonprofits. And I needed to find a way because I was in the nonprofit world. I created Nonprofit CEO, which is a for-profit that services nonprofits. And so,
there you go.
a lot of people have for-profit entities, and like you alluded to before we got on, you have your for-profit, but they also want to find a way to be able to give back to the community, and then still be able to kind of reap some of the tax benefits that can come from having a nonprofit. So I began coaching individuals on how to create a nonprofit, how to run the nonprofit, how to get it off the ground. Because again, people will start a nonprofit, and it'll just sit for years, doing nothing with it. And so, again, I understood how to lift the brand and get it moving. And so I've been doing that on the side for 7, 8 years, since 2018, however many years that is.
That's awesome. Now, I think it's great that we're talking about this because our next big assignment is we're talking about the legal structures of business. And they vary depending on nonprofit and for profit. They vary depending on partnership, sole proprietorship, LLC, all that stuff.
Mhm.
And it's not the sexy fun part of running a business, but it's so important to establish that at the beginning. Because you talked about the tax benefits. They definitely vary from state to state and it depends on the structure. So as kids are coming up with their concepts, why is it so important to know what you are legally and how you are structured legally?
Just the word you said legally is really important because again, if you don't have those things set up legally the correct way, you just never know down the road. You may, again, you may get away with it being structured illegally for a while, or even if it's legal, like you said, sole proprietorship, like that structure can work in the short term, but we would never, I don't think anybody would really advise the sole proprietor to stay as your business continues to grow in that same structure forever just because there's no protection against you and your personal assets. So, having the right structure gives safety to the organization. It gives safety to your family and your personal possessions. And it also presents more clarity as far as being able to move forward with partnerships and things as you continue to grow. So, your foundation is just that it's the foundation that's going to determine how you can grow and build in the future. So, having that set properly from the giddy up, and also recognizing that you may start off as, an LLC, just because it's quick, it's easy. So it's like $50 to do that here in the state of Mississippi.
Yeah.
But, as you grow and again create those partnerships, you may want to transition into an S Corp or C Corp. So again, preparing, building out and preparing for your future, all of that's really super important. Having the right people on your team, of course, that can help you decide, hey, at this point, having a great CPA on hand, can say, hey, at this point, we think we might want to look and transition to a different look, a different setup is always good.
Yeah, and we just had a really cool assignment where they came up with their own job descriptions.
Okay.
And hold on one second. Sorry, I had somebody walk in real quick. But when people are building are building their concept, you can, like we said, you can have that for profit and then you can have that nonprofit. And we just had our own assignment where they came up with creating job descriptions, how they would hire people. But a big part of that was who are you going to bring in as a contractor? Because so many people say, well, I can't afford to hire an accountant. Well, you can hire a contract accountant that just works for you 2 or 3 hours a week to manage the books. So for people starting out, why is it important to know that there are people and people like yourself, people can bring in you to help brand your business, to help strategize with your business and still stay nonprofit?
Well, those things are important. Mainly, again, as an entrepreneur, you're going to wear many hats. That's the very beginning, right? But even determining which hats really are a good fit for you to wear in the long term, versus things that you may again want to employ others to do because they really have that skill set, they have the experience to do. Of course, with employment comes employment taxes. It is more expensive. But one of the things that I think that I love about having contractors is that it's not long term, it's not permanent. Again, it gives you the flexibility based upon the budget, based upon your immediate needs. Again, whether it's something where you just use someone for a one-time project or you use them for 5 to 10 years out, but it's just really based upon around your needs. It gives you the flexibility that you need, based on where you're at and based upon the business growth and what can be handled from time to time so that you don't have to wear every hat. Because again, I believe that
Yeah.
you thrive in the areas that you enjoy. And when something is burdensome, like because that still has to be done, you don't necessarily have to be the person to get that done. It's great to be able to hand that off. And then also with contractors, it gives you the ability to negotiate. Like, you can check to see who's going to be the better fit, again, based on history, based on skill set, based on their budget, what are their needs. And then also, there may be opportunities to actually do a trade to where it's a trade for your knowledge and a trade for their knowledge. And then there's no monetary exchange at all. So just the flexibility of being able to do business, through partnership there, that can look a myriad of ways, a myriad of different ways. And so I love that.
Yeah, and that's becoming more and more common. And especially since COVID, there's more and more remote contractors that can be a huge help to businesses. More and more small businesses now are starting as a service to entrepreneurs specifically. So there's a lot of great skilled
Mhm,
people out
mhm.
there that can help you build your business. Now, we also want to talk about Uncommon Courage, which is had a great online presence. You've done so much to highlight and to empower female business owners, not just in Mississippi, but around the country. So talk about how you've been involved with that because, one thing that is not an opinion. It is a fact that right now, black women are the most educated portion of society. And again, not an opinion. The numbers speak for themselves. And the largest amount of new small businesses in the United States are owned by black women or other minority groups. But it's still so important that they get their name out there, they get their brand out there, and you've done a lot to help that. So, talk about how you've done that and why it's so important for these women to make their names known.
So Uncommon Courage originally, I originally started that really as a blog, and it was a way for me to be able to express um, openly some of my own insecurities from when I started off in business. And then as I grew, I realized that there were other entrepreneurs, other Black women, other just women in general, honestly, it didn't make a difference to me whether it's for women of color or women that were not minorities. I just knew that there are a lot of people out there who had great ideas, but didn't necessarily have the courage in order, or the skill set, the knowledge, the connection, the resources in order to move their brand or their idea forward. And so it really became a collaboration of different women coming together, discussing ideas, and then creating networks and creating bridges for them to be able to launch whatever that next thing was. And so one of the first projects that I did underneath the Uncommon Courage brand was bringing individuals who all had their own lane of expertise, but we did a book collaboration. And each person wrote their chapter based upon the area of expertise that they initially had. We did an affirmation journal. So they may have written their affirmation journal around finances. They may have written their chapter around created their affirmation around self-knowledge, self-love, just whatever the thing was, and as a way to be able to encourage the reader. Then they were individually came together and then they would sell that. And really, for them, especially for the women who were in business, it became a lead magnet. It was
Yeah.
a way to be able to attract people to their individual brand, but it did not necessarily only cover the information that a person would need based on finances if their lane was in finances, but it also was encouragement for people who may have been focused on marketing, people that were maybe social media managers. Just again, a great collaboration of women with different talents, different skill set, different lanes coming together putting their knowledge together underneath one umbrella and then using that as a way to be able to attract other businesses. And then one of wonderful things that I loved about doing anthologies is that, you're able to share resources, right? But you're also able to share audiences. So if you're in that book, your audience essentially becomes my audience. My audience also essentially becomes yours. So here's 30 of us. Each one of us had 1,000 or 5,000 followers, times 30, that, we have 100,000 people behind each of us now that can see and get exposure to our different brands. So again, the collaboration of bringing people together and sharing the resources, sharing insights, building together, again, just helps for, what's that saying? When the tide rises, all ships rise together.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
great example of being able to do that. So,
Yeah, and it's really cool on your Instagram. Just so many different types of businesses featured, and we'll share that with everybody. Really cool to see that women being empowered. And before I get to their questions, kind of along the same lines, when I see young people want to go into business for themselves, and like you said, you have to wear a lot of hats, but the skill that just seems to be missing so much is that ability to communicate, to be able to walk in a room and introduce yourself, to be able to even get on a podcast and talk clearly and concisely and confidently. Because at the end of the day, nobody's going to come find you. I don't care who you are. You have
nope.
to be the ambassador for your brand. You have
Uh-huh.
to show the customer that they need what you have. Because I always say you need the customer more than the customer needs you. So it's all about creating that. It's all about creating that perceived value and creating that culture of, hey, it will be great to do business with me because it's going to better our community. So as you see more young people getting into entrepreneurship, what are some ways that they can really start practicing this to set themselves apart? Because you can have a great product, but if you can't sell it, it doesn't matter.
Well, I think it's the way that you present your product that matters. One, it's not so much that you want to market your product, at least for me. I don't think marketing my product is really the way to attract the people out there that want to be a part of what I am doing. I think you need to it's marketing the answer to the problem that they have. So for whatever reason you're going into business because you realize there's a gap, there is an issue that needs to be addressed. And so people are going to shop based upon their appetite. They'll shop based upon their pain. So marketing yourself, based upon the problem that you're able to solve, that's the first thing. And then two, I think that, I'm very intentional when it comes to networking. I had a conversation one day last week with someone. We met for lunch and I was telling them, and it's a new entrepreneur. I was explaining to her one of the things that I try to make sure that I do is before going to an event, I have my 30-second, my 1 minute, my 5 minute pitch, but I also look to see who's going to be there. Once I know who's going to be there, I'm going to do some research to check
There
and
you
see
go.
how their brands can align with my brand so that I can
Oh,
be
big time.
intentional to make sure I'm connecting to the right people I'm there. And then I also have a formula that I follow. So, and it's 20, 20, 20. So 20%, 20%, 20%. If the room has 400 people in there, then I'm going to make sure that I'm able to connect to 20% of the room. I know that's a lot, but just making real quick, hello, good morning, whomever it is, if I can connect to at least 20% of the room, that's great. Now, out of that 20% of the room that I connect to, remember we started with 400 people, 20% is going to be 80. 20% of those need to be new people. So 16 out of the 80 people are people I've not had an opportunity
Wow.
to connect with, right? And then after that, I need to make sure that I follow up with at least 20% of them within the first hour of me leaving. But again, that's my 20 20 20 is the formula
Man,
I follow. But
that is
it's
awesome.
intentional networking. So again, if I can identify who's going to be there, I can identify their brand, I can identify ways that we could actually connect and partner. That automatically gives me ways to be able to, it gives me conversation pieces to say when we do connect. So it's not just awkward. Hey, how's the weather doing? How about that sports team? We can talk about other things that are not quite as, that help to really build a bridge because they're there for the same reason I am. We're all representing something that's important to us. And so as quickly as I think that we can to be able to exchange that information and then to do the follow-up, I think that that's even better. So I'm just very intentional with my networking.
That's awesome. Well, I do have some great questions here, and
Okay.
I'll let you know some of these business concepts are really cool. They've all come up with them on their own. This first one is Kanisha Kennedy. She's in 11th grade, and her
Okay.
business concept is a female-owned auto detail shop, which has all type of potential to franchise as well. But she asked, "What has been your proudest moment as an entrepreneur?"
Oh, my proudest moment. So I have this photo of my boys and I have two kids. At the time, they were 5 and probably like 11 or 12. It was my first brick and mortar business. I had a venue a few years after Hurricane Katrina, or maybe like a year or so after Hurricane Katrina. And it was so that people could come and rent a space for meetings or special events and things. And so just being able, that photo reminds me that my boys physically were able to see something that I was able to accomplish. And we were, they would come and they would work with me. So it helped to inspire them too. My goal is that, I help and inspire them to want to go out and also make positive change, build something for themselves with their own hands. And so that's, when I see that photo, it always just makes me smile. So I'm like, it's not just me that's building that. My boys
Yeah.
were able to build it with me.
That's awesome. I like this one. This is Jacayla Cross. She's in 10th grade. Has a cool concept for a venue to bring Asian culture to urban areas. Really, really interesting. But she asked, as a beginning entrepreneur, what would be the most important thing to focus on? Products, marketing, or money?
Wow. Most important, product, marketing, or money. I personally, it's marketing for me, because, my people don't necessarily know to even come get your product, and you will not make money if they don't know you exist. Having a solid idea, and the product, and even with the product, like it doesn't have to be, in my mind, again, depending upon what it is. Um, and maybe I should maybe okay, I'm going to pause for a moment. If your product is something physical, you do want to make sure that it's tested and it's going to hold up and it's going to
Oh,
last.
yeah. Oh,
Let's
yeah.
so if it's a physical product, and I don't have physical products, that's why for me marketing
Yep.
comes up more top of mind. But if I had a physical product, I need to make sure for sure that it's been tested, that it's going to last, it's going to do the thing it needs to. And then after that, it would be marketing, and the money would be the last thing because I just feel like the money's going to flow with proper marketing, people knowing that I'm there. Now, in the digital world, I think marketing is probably going to be more important because you may start off with one product and that's going to change as you see what the people how they respond to the things that you're offering. You'll see oftentimes that people shift as the market changes. The product and ideas are shifting. So that would probably those two really depend upon which lane you're in will be the top two for Tiffany.
Awesome. I like this one. And this is Jameer Mayfield. He's in 11th grade. Has a really cool concept to have a mobile barbecue shop, but
Okay.
also have a nonprofit aspect that feeds the homeless. So really, really cool mix there. And he's also a member of our drum line here at Velma Jackson.
Oh,
But
my fabulous memory.
he asked, how do you balance achieving your social mission with the need for financial sustainability?
I think that initially, my first the financial sustainability, especially because of the nonprofit side, I think that's going to be foremost, the most important. I would make sure to concentrate on that end first, and then I'd focus more so on being able to resource the public. Um, there are a lot of people who will be willing to invest and help on that second side, but in the nonprofit world, nobody wants to give to a failing entity. And so with that,
A
if
great
people
point.
can see that you're sustainable on the for-profit side, they're more than likely willing to partner with you on the for-profit, on the nonprofit side. And then again, you'll see there are lots of opportunities out there and you know, lots of opportunities out there for partnership. But again, they do need to see the financial sustainability side. So build your for-profit first, then focus in on the nonprofit side of things. And
Yeah,
on the
that's a great
nonprofit
point.
side. though you can give, when it comes to being able to get some of those partnerships, a lot of people will not partner until you hit that 3 year market, 3 year benchmark. And a lot of times that's not like something that's said out loud, but a lot of grants, you don't qualify because people want to see that you've been around for at least 3 years. So use those 3 years, start the nonprofit on paper so that it can age, but work the for profit. And then by the time you get to the three, the other side, if you want additional funding, once you hit that 3 year mark, you should be at a far better place to be able to make it work.
That's a great point. I never thought about that. All right, I got time for two more. This is Tredarius Quinn.
Okay.
He's in 10th grade, also a member of our drum line. He has a really
Okay.
cool, actually already operating his own clothing line. And he asked, how has your organization evolved since your original opening?
Okay, so originally, remember earlier I was saying that I originally, I said a moment ago that as time goes on, you may pivot based on what you see the need to be. So originally I was pitching coaching um, packages to people that already had established nonprofits. And what I learned along the way is that there was a bigger audience of people out there again. So and take into consideration it was post COVID and pre-COVID and post-COVID. Post-COVID, we had a lot of people who were leaving the corporate workspace and wanting to create things on their own. So I recognized like, oh, I need to shift. It's not so much about coaching individuals that already have. I need to be there to help the people who are wanting to start up. So it's really about having an ear, recognizing the market, seeing the trends, what's happening, and then I adjust it. So probably about 90% of what I do is really on helping startups start up. And then I can also offer continuing packages to them that will help them grow and maintain until they hit those 3 and 5, 10 year benchmarks.
Love it. And I got one more. This is Chandra Black. She's in 10th grade. Already working as a cosmetologist, wants to get into the salon space and very talented with hair. And she's really wants to learn more. But she asked, what would be the best way to keep reaching customers that I didn't already know?
Oh, so when I think of cosmetology, one of my favorite I can't think of the name of the brand, but we are sold by what we see. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like it's the visuals. So in cosmetology wise, one, I would offer my clients some type of discount or an offer by having them share out whatever it is. I would turn that person when they come in, I definitely would turn them into a story. Why? Because everybody likes seeing their name in lights. Like it's just the thing, give everybody their moment to shine. But creating affiliate packages, like so for every person that you refer and come in, you get 10% off your next visit. So again, and we like one, we want to look good, right? But then two, we also really believe in being able to save money and make money. So create packages in my way for those individuals to become the referral service that you want them to be. Because again, their audience becomes your audience. You have your set amount of followers, but when they share out to their followers, their audience becomes yours, and that multiplies. But actually build it out so it is a solid affiliate style marketing program. So again, it will, again, if you give people opportunity to save or make money, they're going to be there for you. And to make sure for sure that you have good customer service and customer care.
Yeah, and she's already doing a great job of that. Really impressed. Now we're almost out of time, and we thank you so much for joining us. But a couple things before we go. First of all, Tiffany D. Bell on Instagram. You can see all the things you're doing. Some of the entrepreneurs that you have highlighted. So I encourage everybody to go follow you there. But like we've talked about, and I'm so glad you talked about Mississippi because it really is such a great place to start a business. Now you can start a business and go somewhere else later, but this is such a great place, which the way everything's set up to start a business. And I just want these kids to know that we need Black business owners in all of our communities. It helps our community, it helps our culture, it helps our economy, and it helps build that generational wealth that so many people talk about on TikTok. So as these kids start making decisions of what they're going to do, and you heard their great business concepts, why should they really consider taking these concepts seriously and putting them into action after they graduate?
Well, I would probably say like before you graduate, begin putting those things into action now. definitely important because again, I think the sooner we start, the longer, the better opportunities you have as far as creating long-term connections, partnerships. But and then you just don't know what's coming down the lane. Like if you have the time and the ability to get started now, do what you can now. When none of us are promised tomorrow. And there are lots of opportunities. One of the things I love about the state of Mississippi, I feel like Mississippi is really supportive of the entrepreneurial culture. And so again, we support each other, but also there are just lots of programs out there that will help young people there. Especially I think that majority of you guys are minorities, right? There are lots of minority opportunities that are out there for startups. So, if you need help, if you're not, I guess some of you guys have not necessarily graduated and legally may or may not be able to do some of the financial things based on age, find the right partner that you can trust, an adult that you can trust. It may be your parents, it may be a godparent, whomever. But forge those partnerships now and get started as soon as you can. And don't worry about not being able to make it. Do what you can with what you have, and it'll come.
Love it. Well, don't go quite yet. When I stop recording, I want to talk to you just for a couple minutes.
Okay.
But we thank you again. We thank you so much for joining us all the way from Gulfport. My friend, Tiffany Bell, thank you so much for joining us today.